It was a bombshell New York Times story that revealed the president's tax returns. Trump engaged in suspect tax schemes as he reaped riches from his father. Now, Donald Trump is suing the New York Times of what he calls an insidious plot, as well as his niece, cable news fixture Mary Trump, who signed a confidentiality agreement 2 decades ago in settling a suit over a family inheritance. But this much is true. Mary Trump acknowledged in a Daily Beast podcast that one of the 3 Times reporters named as defendant, Suzanne Craig, got her to cough up the confidential returns.
It's entirely down to the brilliant Suzanne Craig. For one, reminding me that I had them, and 2, so effectively and tenaciously trying to convince. I mean, it took her months before I did. So it's entirely down to her.
The Times says this lawsuit is an attempt to silence independent news organizations, and we plan to vigorously defend against it. Ben, this is a breach of confidentiality suit, not a libel suit. And here's Mary Trump, who's hated her uncle for 2 decades, admitting that a New York Times reporter persuaded her to turn over the president's tax records. Does he have a case at least against her?
It certainly seems like he does, given the nature of this agreement. It's not one that we know the specifics about necessarily yet, though I'm sure that we will learn about them during the course of this case. I would be much more concerned if I were in her position in this circumstance than I would if I was at the New York Times. But we should keep in mind that this is part of this overall trend of adjudicating a lot of things like this that I think is going to become an even bigger and regular part of covering politicians going forward. You may have seen, for instance, the allowance that this lawsuit, a defamation suit brought by Congressman Devin Nunes against journalist Ryan Lizza, was allowed to proceed this past week. This is going to be a type of thing that I think we see happen more and more regularly in the era when records like these are very much in demand, and there's plenty of outlets that are willing to run the risk of reporting on them.
Right. Well, people have the right to sue, but it's very difficult under existing libel law for public figures to successfully sue. Mara, what's the case against the New York Times, which won a Pulitzer for its tax reporting? I mean, investigative reporters press sources to provide documents all the time. This didn't come from the government, and the Times never signed any kind of confidentiality agreement.
Yeah,
obviously.
it's hard to... It's hard to see what kind of legal jeopardy the Times is in. How much legal jeopardy Mary Trump is in is another matter, and I certainly don't know. But Donald Trump is litigious, and he has sued lots and lots of people and organizations through the course of his career. And I don't really know what this suit gets him, especially if he can't prevail against the New York Times.
Well, it's obviously choked you up. Look, Ben, the media's reaction to this litigation has been to gleefully quote Mary Trump as saying Donald Trump's a blanking loser, and to bring on all these legal experts who say, oh, Trump was avoiding taxes. But while the 2018 Times story was denounced by President Trump as fake news, here in this suit he's asking at least $100 million in damages. Isn't he acknowledging that the story itself was true?
I think that's the risk that you run by getting involved in the litigious response to something like this.
Not to mention depositions.
And look, yes, I think that's always something that can result in all manner of things. But as Mara said, this is an individual who, even prior to becoming president, was very litigious and would go after people in different ways. This is another example of him doing that. But I think that we should not forget how differently the Times story was treated in terms of the records that were reported on versus the treatment of the Hunter Biden story, which is only now, it seems, getting the kind of credibility treatment from major outlets. It's as if they just had to wait long enough to treat the story seriously and the questions that were raised by it. Personally, I never was as curious about Donald Trump's tax returns as other people were. I feel like it's one of those things where you open the vault doors and there's not as much there as you might have thought.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is going to be something that keeps this story in the news. Whether that's something that is wise for him to do or not is up to him.
I just happen to have some examples of past lawsuits by Donald Trump. His campaign sued CNN and the New York Times last year over opinion columns. He sued a journalist over a 2005 book questioning his net worth. In the 80s, Trump sued the Chicago Tribune over the architecture critic panning his plan for a skyscraper there. And Mara, he didn't win any of those. kind of
No,
supporting your
he
earlier
doesn't
point.
have a good track record.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't have a good track record with these lawsuits, and as Ben said, they might boomerang because they keep all these questions about him out in the public.
Ben, I've got about half a minute. You made the point earlier that you think this may become an increasing common feature of politics, where politicians sue journalists who, God knows, are not very popular. But does that disturb you at all? Is that where this should all be fought out? You know, while acknowledging, obviously, that anybody who feels liable can go to court.
I think it's we should just look across the pond at the UK and see the kind of difficulty that you can get into simply for having someone like Piers Morgan criticize Meghan Markle on air. We don't want to go in that direction here in America. We want to have a very strong First Amendment protection for journalists when they report things out. And I think that we should really look at making it easier for people to essentially insure themselves against these lawsuits and prevent them from being something that prevents you from reporting the truth. Now, of course, that doesn't include material that's truly defamatory or that is just a tissue of lies. But we want to have that kind of strength, and in an environment in which anybody can be a journalist when they just flip on a switch and connect to the Wi-Fi, it's going to become a situation where a lot more of these things are going to be adjudicated, I think, in the court.
And by the way, even a lousy lawsuit can force you to spend a lot on legal fees. Ben Domenech, Mara Eliason, great to see you this Sunday.